I was browsing through Twitter on Thursday night and I stumbled across quite the get for Vice News. They announced they had just recorded an exclusive interview with Michael Reinell, the self-proclaimed 100% Antifa man accused of killing Patriot Prayer activist Aaron J. Danielson in cold blood in Portland on Saturday night. And when I say accused, I mean that purely in the formal sense, as in that judgment has not been rendered through due process. The guy did it. It's on video, it's complete with director's commentary about why. Hey, this guy over here's a Trump supporter. Who? This guy? Yes, this guy right here. Bang, bang. The interview was promoted with a teaser of Reinell claiming the incident was self-defense. Tune in at 11 Eastern to find out how. The Twitter and YouTube reactions were predictably unkind, and it's understandable why. There's probably not much in this guy's testimony that's more valuable than the video of the incident itself, and even if there was, how likely are you to get that information from a journalist interviewing him who himself has stated intent, or at least helpful advice for those looking to see Antifa gain more mainstream acceptance? To what extent was this interview aiding and abetting a killer? To what extent was this interview just legitimate journalism? It's hard to ignore that those with stated Antifa sympathies apparently have access to Antifa criminals well beyond anybody else. That said, I'm glad to have the information in this interview because, as it turns out, there wasn't much time left to get it. At first, I thought it was a little awkward for Vice to be platforming, if not yet formally a fugitive, a very soon-to-be fugitive with a warrant for his arrest imminent. Not nearly as awkward as it would get, though, because this guy was right about to die by making his own counterpoint. The cops kill white people, too. Before most people, myself included, even saw the Vice News interview, news was already breaking that Reinell had died in a shootout with police outside of Olympia, Washington. Well, I guess I'm glad we got the information that we did then, and it turns out there was, in fact, a lot of value in this interview, ethics of it aside. But before we get to that segment, let's recap how this man who says he did nothing wrong kept perpetually and inexplicably finding himself in the wrong situations, paying the ultimate price in this one. Because remember, this wasn't Reinell's first adversarial encounter with the law. He was wanted in Baker County in eastern Oregon for DUI, reckless driving, and unlawful firearm possession. This incident was apparently racing his 17-year-old son at speeds exceeding over 100 miles an hour with his young daughter in the car, the same daughter he later brought to the Portland protests with a baseball bat. And then on July 5th, he was arrested during one of those Portland protests, charged with resisting arrest and illegally carrying a firearm. The charges were dropped. At the end of July, he told a reporter he had been shot in the arm after intervening in a fight downtown.
I jumped in there and pulled the gun away from people's heads, avoided being shot in the stomach, and I got shot through the arm.
The details of that story aren't entirely clear or substantiated, so decide for yourself if you buy them or not. But whatever that injury was, it wasn't so severe that he couldn't kill Jay Danielson on the streets of Portland on Saturday night. It wasn't so severe that he couldn't flee the city and the state upon a warrant issued for his arrest on Thursday. It wasn't so severe that this supposedly innocent man couldn't stop his inexplicable but repeated hostile encounters with the law until the law ended them on Thursday night. Reports are that upon confrontation with police in Lacey, Washington, Reinell exited an apartment building armed with a rifle and engaged police in a firefight, losing that fight to a federally led fugitive task force. One witness's video makes it sound like it was a pretty quick event.
I was sitting in my backyard and all I heard was pop, 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 pop. He bleeding. They hit him. I don't know why anybody would want to shoot out with the police out here. They deep.
And of course, on the streets of Portland, bringing Reinell to justice is protested as yet another example of injustice. Several hundred demonstrators gathered in front of a Portland police station decrying Michael Reinell's supposed murder, which of course makes no sense considering Michael Reinell, by all available evidence, was a murderer who could have easily avoided being supposedly murdered by not trying to murder the cops himself with a weapon that you guys generally believe should be banned anyway. All that, and the Portland police never even arrested him. They let him run. The cops that caught up with him and took him down were feds and state and local Washington police forces. The entire Oregon justice system laid down for this guy as long as they could. They didn't kill him. He did a perfect job of getting himself killed through his own actions. There can't be a trial if you keep pointing your guns at people, because eventually one fires back, or in this case, 4. And if that's the fate that the guy chose, I'm glad to get the information out of him that we did. If you can't get a trial, it's nice to get the information that would have been presented at trial. And to that effect, this Vice interview has 2 primary points of value. We know that Reinell was the right guy, and we know he had no plausible defense. We know Reinell is the right guy because he admitted that he's the guy. He did the shooting.
And I felt like I had no choice but to do what I did. Hate to say it, but I see a civil war right around the corner. That shot felt like the beginning of a war.
And just in case you had any lingering doubt that this was murder, the video clip of the incident is damning, but it's short. Maybe you think there's still some information out there that we didn't previously know. You now get to hear this guy's defense. If you want to remove all doubt, it's good to know that this guy, as his own best advocate, has nothing specific to offer. And no, that's not because some lawyer told him to shut it. He says he's doing this interview against legal advice. He says he's doing this interview only to get the truth out there.
Lots of lawyers suggest that I shouldn't even be saying anything, but I feel it's important that the world at least gets a little bit of what's really going on, because there's been a lot of propaganda put out there.
He says it was clear and necessary self-defense. He says if he hadn't acted, he and his friend of color, very important detail, friend of color, would have been killed.
And just to reiterate, you feel that it was totally justified?
Totally justified. Had I not acted, I am confident that my friend and I'm sure I would have been killed. I had no choice. I mean, I had a choice. I could have sat there and watched them kill a friend of mine of color, but I wasn't going to do that.
And it's totally unclear what he means here. Is this friend of color a real specific person? Or just hypothetical? If this person is real, you'd think we'd get a corresponding story about how this person was threatened or what violent actions were taken against him. You would think we'd at least get an identity of this person. But instead, we just get stories about how trucks and flags make him feel unsafe.
I used to really love this country, and I respected the flag and everything that it represented. But because of all this, every time I see a big truck, especially with a flag on it, I immediately think that they're out to get me. There were 600 vehicles. Who knows how many were rolling through downtown, but like I said, when I showed up, I saw more of their vehicles than real citizen vehicles.
Real citizen vehicles. What is it about a truck that makes the driver not a real citizen? Or is it just flags with which you disagree on a vehicle that make the driver not a real citizen? Either way, neither a truck in the street nor a flag constitute an imminent threat to you or your supposed friend of color. And even if trucks or flags were threats, why then did you kill a man who wasn't in a truck and wasn't waving a flag? It's a 5-minute interview, and he has no specific accusation against the man he shot. If your claim is self-defense, the thing you have to explain is how you were attacked, but he never does that. He just makes broad group claims that don't actually have anything to do with the man he shot. And most frustratingly, he never even addresses the audio that is the most damning evidence against him. If this incident was self-defense, why are you heard on recorded audio clarifying if someone is a Trump supporter or not before shooting him? There's no clarification there, and there's little clarification of the other factors that point against self-defense either. If this incident was self-defense, why did you flee the scene?
Right after it happened, did you panic? Did you run?
Those are a bit of details I probably don't want to get into, other than just simply saying that, you know, I realized what had happened. I was confident that I did not hit anyone innocent.
Well, why wouldn't you want to discuss those details? I thought this interview was all about just getting the truth out there, not legally protecting yourself. But that's as close to a specific answer as we're going to get, though, and plenty of other questions remain. Even if this incident was legitimately defensive and the scene was dangerous, so he fled the scene, why then did he flee the city later after the danger had ended? Why did he flee the state? If he's so peaceful and defensive, why wasn't he peaceful in his upcoming fatal encounter with the cops? Before he died, it's good to know we got his best information out of him. This guy had no case, by his own tacit admission. We know there was no mistake on his identity, and we know there was no mistake in our understanding of the facts of the case. But that, of course, doesn't mean that media won't still try to install confusion and blur this crystal clear case. One thing I noticed on the first watch of this Vice News interview is they show you the footage of the shooting, but they never actually subtitle or explain the audio of the shooter targeting the victim for Trump support. And that's a pattern that is also true across NBC, CBS, and CNN's Friday morning coverage. They'll show you the shooting footage, but they'll never play, let alone subtitle, that crucial audio. They will, however, offer plenty of other hardly relevant details. CNN wants you perfectly clear that earlier in the day, people shot paintballs from their trucks.
It happened as a caravan of Trump supporters rolled through the streets, firing paintballs at the crowd.
And presented as though they did so out of aggression. No mention of the left-wing protesters blocking traffic and attacking cars. But even if that was a totally unprovoked paintball attack, so what? The question is, did Jay Danielson attack Michael Reinell with a paintball gun? If not, then the fact that other people did to other people earlier in the day has no relevance whatsoever to whether Michael Reinell defended himself or not. CBS and NBC want you to be very clear about just how right-wing Jay Danielson supposedly was.
His victim, Aaron J. Danielson, was linked to an ultra-conservative group, Patriot Prayer.
Right-wing protester.
The leader of the far-right group Patriot Prayer says Danielson was a supporter.
But Michael Reinell, well, he just leaned left.
The police shooting and killing of a left-leaning suspect.
If that guy leans left, these journalists are going to have to define fringe for me. But add that to the stack of crucial information they will never tell you. They won't even say that this guy admitted to killing someone. The Vice News piece just says he's linked to a killing. CBS says he's just a guy who strongly suggested he's responsible for a crime.
Reinell had strongly suggested that he was the one responsible for a crime.
NBC says he was just believed to be involved with a killing. And don't forget, the guy that got killed, very right-wing.
Michael Forrest Reinell, who was believed to be involved in the killing of a right-wing supporter of President Trump.
That presentation would have you believe that just a regular guy was loosely or ambiguously involved with the killing of a right-wing extremist, but all of the evidence shows a politically motivated murder by a left-wing terrorist against a man whose only crime was loving his country too proudly and too publicly for that terrorist taste. Given the clarity of those facts and the total lack of a counter case, that media negligence in reporting this story would be amazing if it hadn't long been standard practice. The only people arguably more negligent in this case are the authorities in the state of Oregon and the city of Portland. How is it that a Vice reporter can find this guy and sit him down for a lengthy, highly produced interview almost a week after he killed someone in cold blood on video? But Oregon authorities can't find him after issuing a warrant for his arrest and allow him to flee the state and pass the risk of this terrorist off to another city and another state and to federal authorities, feds who have been under persistent attack in the city of Portland for months. And Portland is apparently doing everything they can to ensure they remain under attack elsewhere too. And so far, I have seen no specific statement from either Oregon Governor Kate Brown or Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler as to why they allowed this criminal to flee their jurisdiction. Kate Brown issued a statement condemning violence generally without any specific mention of this incident. And Ted Wheeler, well, Ted is too busy fleeing the mob himself to have any worry for violent criminals fleeing justice in his city. No statement is probably better than their typical statements, though. I'd of course like to hear the truth of the matter, but we're not going to get that. So more realistically, I'd just like to hear the creative way they come up with to blame the feds yet again for this episode of violence, too, despite the feds being the only reasonable force for justice in that city for months. But hey, good luck with that new apartment, Ted. Here's hoping you find a nice one way high up there where your risk of getting mobbed or murdered is minimal, and your view of it happening to everyone else in the city is amazing. And before I sign off, a quick update on the music situation from last video. A big thank you to all of the musicians in the audience who submitted your work for consideration. I am incredibly impressed by the talent in this audience. For the time being though, I've decided to work with a friend of the channel. I'll be mixing up his music in the outros on my videos. If you like what you hear, please check out his channel, linked in the description. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.